I love these collections because they're really sort of a Rorschach of the person. This collection is very much about the eye of David Solinger, a love of abstraction, a love of color, a love of depth.
When he bought something, he bought it because he loved it, and he didn't mind what you and I thought about it.
He was really at the right place at the right time. Whilst we look back on it now as almost being another era, I think this gives us this really tantalizing glimpse of just how innovative and avant-garde that particular moment in time really was. The collection of David M. Solinger really represents an incredible time capsule. In the mid-1950s, at the apex of creativity both in France and in America, he very much immersed himself within the cultural milieu of the two cities, not only through seeing works of art by these artists and indeed in many cases developing relationships with the artists themselves, but equally putting himself in the middle of a dialogue and conversation with the artists and their dealers. David M. Solinger was a highly innovative and very accomplished lawyer in advertising specifically, but equally represented as a lawyer certain artists. But David Solinger was also much more than this. He came back from having served in the US Army and through a chance encounter with a friend, started taking amateur painting classes. David immersed himself in art and of course, as well as looking at art regularly and being a practicing artist, he understood artistic processes, and I think that's what drove him ultimately to have correspondence with a number of artists that he collected.
He actually visited all the artists' studios. He was obsessed. For the first time he saw de Kooning, he went to see the show and he didn't leave for a whole day. He was very, very prudent in his purchases, very focused, but also very open to new ideas. As a consequence, he got some remarkable things and some very challenging, fantastic things. Great paintings. Picasso is a very great painting. It is, of course, also a very challenging painting, what we call museum quality painting.
David's collection is really a celebration of the beauty of abstraction and color, but it's really about that kind of wonderful exploitation of materials and touch and scale that each artist brings to very different aspects of their work, which is a great depth in the collection.
I think the thread ultimately between this collection and the extraordinary time capsule that it represents is really this incredible engagement with visual art in a space and time. And what it represents, of course, looking back on it now, is this absolute fulcrum movement between the avant-garde pre-war French and very specifically Parisian-based avant-garde to the avant-garde of New York in the immediate post-war period. The collection is really permeated by a number of major highlights. This astoundingly great de Kooning collage from 1950 that was acquired in 1952. The Trois Hommes qui Marchent by Alberto Giacometti is also a major highlight. It has a painted base and painted figures indeed. There's also then the Joan Miró, which is a tantalizing glimpse at Miró's painterly practice directly after the famous Constellation series, which took New York by storm indeed at the end of the Second World War. But of course it's also the European modernists as well, whether it be Pierre Soulages or Georges Mathieu, Vieira da Silva, or this extraordinarily comprehensive group of Jean Dubuffets. Or indeed, the Paul Klee works on paper and the extraordinary and illuminating painting in the collection. David was an incredible philanthropist. He came up with the Friends of the Whitney, and he became the very first non-Whitney family member to become president of the board of the Whitney.
The Whitney then, David worked with the other trustees. They took the Whitney public, and he then led the development of the Breuer building. It was an extraordinary gesture on Madison Avenue amidst the more classical concepts of what a museum could be, and this really changed things entirely, and also, gave license to the idea of the Whitney creating a platform for contemporary art. There are very few collections of this caliber that are really left in private hands, and the beauty and pursuit and the passion, how these works were assembled, is something that took a lot of time.
The fact that all of these works are coming to market now and really amply reflect what was happening both in Paris and New York in the 20th century represents an astoundingly great opportunity, not only for collectors, but I think equally for students of art, with this wonderful educational snapshot of a period of time.
David is a very rare generation of collector and philanthropist. He really was what I call a dedicated buyer. So anybody who buys into this collection buys into history.